Okay, as of like last week, we're going live a little bit early. So if you sign in early, and you're seeing me now, so let me still doing the Twitter stuff. We're still 17 shy, 18 shy at the moment of beating Joe Biden, which is our goal. Of course, technically, we're not on yet. We've still got another few minutes. So I ask you to spread the word. Help me do it. Help me outdraw Joe Biden, which should not be a big task. But I mean, he has the Democrat Party and the Democrat apparatus behind him. And I have a laptop that is still busted, which is why you'll notice I'm looking up again. I'm using a TV screen and a scarf, and it sounds like my wife is just coming home, so it's going to get really noisy in a few minutes. But that's okay. I like my wife. Always worthwhile to have her around. If I didn't like her, we wouldn't be married for 32 years. Which I had to remind her. She actually mentioned 31 years earlier. But for those of you who've tuned in early, this is Pete the Tech Guy. This is the Tech Guy Off the Radio live stream podcast. We're very happy to have you. And our goal is to outdraw Joe Biden. So I ask you to, spread, if you're watching now or if you have friends watching, spread it around. Technically, we don't stop for another 3 minutes. But I want to be able to say that I have a live stream podcast with more people than Joe Biden. So, here's a nice double standard that's on Twitter that's just breaking. Governor Cuomo had ordered health officials to the airport to turn around Ted Nugent and Captain Clay Higgins to further cross the Nassau County Back to Blue rally. Black Lives Matter, however, is still free to riot, murder, and rally because the lawsuit there would be wonderful. And there's going to be some wonderful lawsuits going on. And speaking of lawsuits, this is some breaking news. Well, not all that breaking. This has actually happened while I was off getting my tire fixed. This is from Instapundit. Washington Post settles Nicholas Sandeman defamation lawsuit in Covington Catholic High School controversy. Quote, on February 19th, 2019, I filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit against the Washington Post. Today, I turned 18, and the Washington Post settled my lawsuit, which is a very nice birthday present. That's not a quote. Sandeman announced on Twitter. Sandeman offered a not-so-subtle warning to Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. We have settled with the Washington Post and CNN. The fight isn't over. 2 down, 6 to go. Don't hold your breath, Jack. Now, there's a certain young lady who we're going to be discussing on this podcast who is probably looking at that and saying, "See, the tech guy, don't be so sure you can mention me in your podcast because I've publicly threatened to sue you if you do." Well, I'm not CNN. I'm not all of those other things. And I don't have an awful lot. What I have, I'd like to protect. But I also know enough about the First Amendment and know enough that if you say something in a public forum, you know what? If you address me in a public forum, that's in a public way. That's just the way it is. So you're going to get, if I want to mention what you said to me in a public forum that everyone in the world is allowed to read, guess it's going to happen. Okay. It's very, very, very funny. It's very, very funny. Now, Carol Markowitz has a very nice tweet. And we'll have to get to this we're going to have to get to this when we discuss baseball in a few minutes. And it's now officially 3:00. Welcome to the Tech Guy Off the Radio live stream podcast. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy. Have fedora, Dr. Scoff, and all that stuff will travel. I'm delighted that you are here to join us in our live stream, and we are currently trying to catch up to Joe Biden. Joe Biden managed 18 people on his live stream, and I would like to beat him today. I'm going to tweet it out again and try and get it in. Okay, we're going to retweet that. And we're going to retweet the other one. And now we're going to tweet one more time to try and get a few more people in here before we start. I do apologize for those of you who are already here, but we've got a purpose today, and a specific purpose. And I think I talk loud enough that you can probably still hear me. Okay, typing now on Twitter. We are live now. Help me outdraw Joe Biden on this live stream. I only need 19 of you. Okay, put the link. And we're going to put a few links there. See if I can get people to jump in. Again, I do apologize for the delay because I'm the only one who can do this while I'm doing this. So, and we'll throw the Twitchy team on there too. And one more. I'm having a brain fart. Okay, so that's the best I can do for now. If people decide they're not going to come, they're not going to come. So here we are again, the Tech Guy off the radio, and we have a lot to talk about today. And I want to start with something very interesting. Now, I've mentioned this book before. I should say this series of books called American History Told by Contemporaries, which were written between about 1899 to I think around 19. I think the first one was written around 1888 or so, and the last one was finished sometime in the 1920s by historian Albert Bushnell Hart, who was a Harvard professor, wrote 1 billion books. And this is basically this collection, 5 volumes. I own 4 of them. Quotes people in their own words. Rather than commenting on history, writing about history, he basically takes excerpts from what people have written, either in letters or in public speeches or so forth, puts a little bit of blurb in front of it. This is who the person is. This is where we've referenced them before. And these are his prejudices. And if a person has prejudices, he mentions them because he's a good historian, unlike a Howard Zinn. Tons of references and so forth. And then puts the quote out there. And what I do is I bought these books a while back, and I've take them to work. Right now I have volume 4 at work, and I read them during my lunch. I got a 20-minute break at 6:30, and then a lunch break at 9:30 for a half hour. And during those 2 breaks, I go into the cafeteria, I take out this book, and I continue where I left off reading history. I'm probably the only person who's not on a phone, and I'm reading a history book older than everybody in the place, because I think the book I'm reading is 110 years old. And right now I'm in 1860, the beginning of secession. And for the last several weeks, other than the time that I was quarantined, last week I was in quarantine, this week I'm not. My wife's COVID test came up negative, for those of you wondering. And I've been reading all the run-up to the Civil War. The Civil War, where I am right now, the Civil War hasn't started yet. It's still, Lincoln actually hasn't been inaugurated yet, although he's already writing letters and giving out orders and saying what he's going to say. And what's interesting about it, what is so interesting about it, is listening to these arguments of pro-slavery, pro-Confederacy people and comparing them to what the left is saying now about Portland. Now, we have heard Nancy Pelosi talk about secret police. The president's got secret police out there. Never mind the fact that everybody knows these people are there. Never mind that they're in uniform. Never mind that they have patches saying that they're from the Department of Homeland Security. And never mind that they're defending federal property in a United States city. These are secret police. They cannot be there. We have mayors, Democrat mayors, and only Democrat mayors and governors saying, we will sue if the federal government puts in there. We will not cooperate. We will not let our police cooperate with such people. This is an overreach of federal power. And how horrible and horrible and horrible it is that this is going on. And what's going on now, so we're hearing this from everyone from Ted Wheeler to Nancy Pelosi, from Chuck Schumer, and even Joe Biden's getting into the act about how Trump is, these are his stormtroopers to steal the election type of thing. And I gotta admit, I'm laughing like hell because I'm hearing all of these things. And I'm reading at the same time the same things being said, the very same things being said. Okay, we picked up a few more, still 15 more for Biden. Okay, we need 16, let's say 16 more to beat Biden. To beat Biden. Tell your friends. And yeah, so I'm reading this stuff, and I am just laughing my head off because of what's going on. And I want to read you this piece. I wrote this piece, and I felt a little bit guilty because I got the piece up, and I had finished it, and I said, I could put it up this day, but it'd be better as a lead post for the site. So I'm going to wait the next day, and it doesn't end cold to put up a similar piece. I felt like a dope. Get this stuff up early. But I want to read you from this piece. This is called "The Democrat Slavery, Jim Crow, Not Our Business Argument is Back for Portland." Now, I had an interesting exchange online with someone considering what was going on in Portland, Oregon. Now, Portland, Oregon is where the wife's father is from. And I'm actually honeymooned in Portland, Oregon. It's beautiful country. I mean, at least back in 1988, it was really beautiful country. And I really, really considered moving there, which was apparently the best non-move I've ever made in my life. And we had a lot of the standard mostly unpoisoned soup arguments. And by mostly unpoisoned soup, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I had a post up. We keep hearing from our Democrat friends, oh, these protests are mostly peaceful, mostly peaceful, mostly peaceful. These are not riots. They are mostly peaceful, both things with these small exceptions. And so I put up a post for a recipe for soup that is mostly unpoisoned. I took the poison doses from the movie Arsenic and Old Lace, which is what they used to poison the wine. And here's the soup ingredients, and these are the poisons we're going to add. And this will create mostly unpoisoned soup. So if you think mostly unpoisoned, mostly peaceful protests are fine, prove it to me. Let's see you drink this mostly unpoisoned soup. If you can have mostly unpoisoned soup and decide it's okay, then I'll believe that mostly peaceful protests are okay. But anyways, I'm digressing a little bit. Back to the article. Along with the standard mostly unpoisoned soup arguments about how peaceful most of the protesters who have been rioting for 2 months are, I heard one argument against the Department of Homeland Security troops being there that did have some resonance. And no, it wasn't the secret police nonsense that my son's friends are falling for and some Democrats are pushing. The argument is that it's a local matter. And in one sense, there's a point there. The citizens of Portland's districts elected the Democrat City Council that's supporting this nonsense. The citizens of Portland, as a whole, elected the Democrat mayor, who has allowed these riots to take place and has handcuffed those police. And incidentally, has discovered that he's not woke enough for them. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about Major League Baseball. The citizens of Oregon, of that congressional district, voted for the congressman who was attacking President Trump for bringing in the federal troops, By the way, we still haven't reached Joe Biden level, so please spread the link to your friends and let's get them on here. We want to beat Joe Biden. The number to beat is 18. Tell your friends we got to beat Joe Biden here. And again, the citizens of Oregon as a whole and Portland voted for the Democratic governor and the Democrat senators who are all going on Donald Trump's case, all saying we cannot do this. They've turned a blind eye to violence, except to attack federal agents in general and President Trump in particular for trying to stop it. And when they're going after federal locations, so all these people in Portland are getting what they voted for. In fact, Eric Erickson argues in a piece, "Let's Portland burn." And Erickson says, quote, "Let the market decision by letting the actions of free people control their fate. The president should withdraw from Portland immediately and let the city burn, if it will, or thrive if it will. But it's the right choice of the people there. A president sending in a police force to a city is a dangerous precedent, which will be expanded upon, even though the United States Constitution lacks a general police power. A city is allowed to choose its own fate on a positive precedent from which we can all draw lessons. Let Portland burn a lot, but let it decide without intervention from Washington." And I would argue that they're at the federal property. They're not all over Portland. Jazz Shaw also notes, people of the city continue to elect the same group of Democrat hang-ringers year after year, no matter how conditions on the ground deteriorate. So does this mean that the rest of the nation and the federal government are out of options besides just waiting for the cities to implode? There's clearly an argument to be made for such a conclusion, though it's an ugly thought to contemplate. As Erickson suggests, there must surely come a point when the remaining sane people in Portland and these other cities will look around at the shootings, the rapes, the arson, the looting, and come to the conclusion that something isn't working. This relies on the old adage which holds that a liberal is just a conservative who hasn't been mugged yet. And that's Jazz Shaw. Now, again, I must confess there is some appeal to this. Why waste federal resources, your tax money and my tax money if you're not living in Portland, to protect people from their own bad decisions? And I've heard variants of this concerning folks who build in areas that are regularly threatened by hurricanes or wildfires. Why should federal dollars be spent to protect these fools from themselves? In fact, your insurance rates, if you have a house on the coastline where there's regular hurricanes, you're paying a high insurance rate, or you're not getting insurance at all because the insurance company is saying, if you're going to build in this risky spot, you're going to pay more. But the funny thing about this argument, as I've said earlier, was I've been reading these exact same points argued by Southern supporters of slavery during the 1850s up to the start of the Civil War for the last month. I've been reading this right along, and this is what's being said. And one of the constant arguments that's made by Democrats concerning slavery is that it's none of the North's damn business what the South chooses to do about slavery. It's not a federal issue, but the issue of the individual states whose citizens support the institution. Now, here is one example of what I'm talking about. Quote, "Never in a single instance has the South, in any shape or form," I can't do a Southern accent, I'm just going to read it. "Never in a single instance has the South in any shape or form," after all, I'm not Hillary Clinton changing accents, "interfered with the North in her municipal regulations, but on the contrary, has tamely submitted to paying tribute to the support of her manufacturers and the establishment of her commercial greatness. Yet lie the serpent warmed in the husbandman's bosom," which shows that that's a very old story. "She turns upon us and stings us to the heart. If Great Britain or any foreign power had heaped upon us the long catalog of insult and abuses that the North has, there's not a man in the whole South who would not have long since shouldered his musket, and if necessary spilt his heart's blood to have avenged them. But because we are members of the same political family, it is contended we must not quarrel, but must suffer all the impositions at the hand that in their fanatical spleen they may choose to heap upon us." Now that is from the Charleston Mercury, written by a person writing under the pseudonym Common Sense, circa 1860. Now, other than the style of the words, that sounds an awful like the Democrats of today. And Joe Biden's an old man, but he's not old enough to have been there in 1860. But you know what sounds even more like the Democrats of today? You know what sounds even more like Nancy Pelosi, who's the head of the titular head of the Democrat Party at the moment? You know who sounds like more like the mayor of Portland, Oregon? Is a Democrat by the name of James Buchanan, who was president of these United States in 1860, when the South started seizing property and arsenals and the slave states seceded. And this is what President James Buchanan said in 1860 and argued when he was arguing to the Congress that he can't go in there and save this federal property. Quote, "How easy would it be for the American people to settle the slavery question forever and to restore peace and harmony to this distracted country. They and they alone can do it. All that is necessary to accomplish this object, and all for which the slave states have ever contended, is to be let alone and to be permitted to manage their domestic institutions in their own way." Now, again, this is not a Democrat. This argument is the same argument you are now hearing from Nancy Pelosi, from Ted Wheeler, from Andrew Cuomo, from the Mayor Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, although she's now quietly allowing federal cooperation, from Atlanta, from the prosecutor in Philadelphia who says he's going to sue. It's the same argument that these Democrats were making to defend slavery. The federal government has no business interfering in our affairs. The North has no business interfering in our affairs. Yet the Democrats are making that argument now. But you know what? We don't have to go back to the 1860s to hear this argument. We do not have to go back to the days of slavery. We do not have to do that. But I got to tell you, it is funny to watch it happen. It is very funny to watch it happen. But we can go to living memory. We don't have to go back to the 19th century where my grandparents were all born. And yes, all my grandparents were born in the 19th century. I am the youngest child of a very big family. We can go back to 1957. Now, in 1957, Lyndon Johnson was pushing to get a Civil Rights Act passed. Now, the Republicans had a Civil Rights Act, but Johnson wanted his own version going. And Johnson was convinced that without a Civil Rights Act passing, he had no chance of being president. So he was very big on trying to get this passed so he could be cleansed on civil rights. And one of the people caught in the middle here was a senator by the name of Senator Richard Russell, who was a Democrat out of Georgia. Now, Russell had a long and distinguished career in the Senate. He was one of the great proponents of military preparedness and one of the greatest defenders of the U.S. Army and U.S. troops. But he was also an arch segregationist. And like all people, he had his flaws. Segregation and white supremacy was his flaw. It's a pretty damn big flaw. But Russell, during the debate in 1957, he ended up in a long debate, and he usually would always make constitutional arguments. But late during the debates here, he lost his temper. And he got into an argument with Senator McNamara from Michigan. Now, this argument I'm about to tell you about, you can find it in Robert Caro's extraordinary biography of Lyndon Johnson, The Years of Lyndon Johnson, specifically Volume 3, Master of the Senate. And let me say right out, as much as I recommend the Albert Bushnell Hart's American History as Told by Contemporaries, I recommend Caro's volumes on Lyndon Johnson. There's 4 volumes out so far. He has 1 volume left, which is the Vietnam years that he's working on now. He's been writing them over 20 years. It is if you want to read history, if you want to know history, brilliant books. You don't have to agree with all of his premises, but they're brilliant books. They're informative books. They're well-researched books. Nothing like the garbage you get from Howard Zinn. Buy them and read them. They are great history. Well, this excerpt that I'm about to read you is from page 965 of Master of the Senate. This is volume 3. Quote, McNamara said Michigan needed no defense, that his state could handle its affairs without outside interference. Quote, then why does not the senator let us do the same? Russell asked. There was applause from the Southern senators seated around him, but he had asked a question, and he was ready to receive an answer for it. McNamara, Doris Fleeson wrote, roared in the bull voice trained in 1,000 union meeting halls, quote, because you've had 90 years and you haven't done it. The riots that have been going on in Portland have been going on for months. Ted Wheeler's had plenty of time to stop these riots. He hasn't done it. Now, back to the piece. I'll readily concede that given our current education system and the lack of an interest in reading anything but the Howard Zinn communist-approved history, some in these debates and arguments might not be familiar to the current Democratic leadership like Nancy Pelosi or Democrat mayors like Ted Wheeler or journalists like Brian Stelter, let alone rank-and-file lefties, Democrats posting on Facebook and Twitter. So I will concede they might not know that these arguments are the ones being there. But as someone who has read this stuff, I find it incredibly interesting that the arguments of today's Democrat left media are the arguments of the slaveholder and the defenders of Jim Crow and are being made under the banner of Black Lives Matter. But in one respect, it makes sense. After all, the slave owner and the proponents of Jim Crow also insisted that the way of life they defended was for Black Americans' own good. And just as in those days, we see blacks trapped in cities controlled by Democrats, beset by crimes, beset by drugs, beset by gangs, with Democrat leaders keeping those who would be free of these plagues and those who would free them from these plagues out of there, supposedly for their own good, and under the argument that we do not need federal help to solve these problems. So the Democrats are back to their segregationist roots in public once again. And again, it is so astounding. And I urge you to read Caro's book. I urge you to go to the link that I provided and take a look at the write-ups concerning slavery. Take a look at the South's arguments and compare them to what is being said and what is being done by the left. And just, you'll be astounded to hear it. And I got to tell you, there's something else that astounded me that I didn't have a chance to put in the post because I didn't read it until yesterday. And that was something from Benjamin Wade, who was a Benjamin Franklin Wade, Objections to Compromise. And I want to read you a bit of this because if you are a pro-Trump person, if you are a person who thinks this administration has not been given a fair shake by the media, this is going to resonate with you. This is Objection to Compromise number 65 in this book. It's by Senator Benjamin Franklin Wade. Quote, this speech is from which this excerpt is taken was delivered in the Senate and represents the radical Republican feeling of the time. And he has the notice to where he's been mentioned before in the book and the bibliography as in number 63 above. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because there's a lot of it, but I want to read you a bit of it though. Well, Mr. President, and he's talking to the President of the Senate, I have disavowed all intention on the part of the Republican Party to harm a hair of your heads anywhere. We hold no doctrine that can possibly work you an inconvenience. We have been faithful to the execution of the laws which you have any interest, and stands confessed on this floor by your own party, and is known to me without confessions. It is not then that Mr. Lincoln is expected to do any overt act by which you might be injured. You will not wait for any, but anticipating that the government may work you an injury, you say you will put an end to it. Which means that simply you intend to either rule or ruin this government. That brings me, sir, to the question of compromise. On the first day of the session, a senator rose in his place and offered a resolution for the appointment of a committee to inquire into the evils that exist between the different sections and to ascertain what can be done to settle this great difficulty. That is the proposition substantially. I tell the senator that I know of no difficulty. And as to compromises, supposing we are all agreed that the day of compromise was at an end, Most solemn compromises we have made have been violated without a whereas. But what are we to compromise? Sir, I am one of those who went forth with zeal to maintain the principles of the great Republican Party. And remember, the Republican Party at this point is about 6 years old. In a constitutional way, we met, as you met. We nominated our candidate for president as vice president, and you did the same yourselves. The issue was made up, and we went to the people on it. Although we have usually been in the minority, although we have been generally beaten, yet this time the justice of our principles and the maelstrom and the maladministration of the government in your hands, remember, Democrat President James Buchanan before him, convinced the people that a change ought to be wrought. And after you tried your utmost, and we tried our utmost, we beat you. And we beat you on the plainest and most palatable issue that had ever been presented to the American people, and the one they understood the best. He's talking about slavery here now. There's no mistaking it. And now when we come to the Capitol, I tell you that our president and vice president must be inaugurated and administer the government as all their predecessors has done. Sir, it would be humiliating and dishonorable to us if we were to listen to a compromise by which he who has the verdict of the people with his pocket should be made his way to the presidential chair. When it comes to that, you have no government. Anarchy intervenes. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Yeah. Anarchy intervenes. Civil war may follow it, and all the evils that may come to human imagination may be consequent on us in such a course. I know what others will do, but I'll tell you that with the verdict of the people given in favor of the platform upon which our candidate has been elected, so far as I'm concerned, I would suffer anything to come before I would compromise that away. Now think about this for a second. Think about that speech. And think about what's happened to Donald Trump. The Republicans nominated Donald Trump after a big battle, 17 candidates. Actually, no, I think there was up to 20. But 17 or 20, something like that. Or maybe it was 20 for the Democrats this year. And the Democrats nominated Hillary Clinton. And both of them went across the country, the media all behind Clinton. And Trump made his case in the plainest and most palatable issue ever presented to the American people. Make America great again. Plain and simple. Everyone could understand. And Donald Trump won. And within 20 minutes of his inauguration, the first article concerning impeaching Trump was published in the Washington Post. And it has been a steady stream of such things. And now we're seeing articles, what will happen if Trump doesn't accept the election results? Are you serious? The Democrats still haven't accepted their election results. And I want to get back to Wade's speech here. Sir, I do not believe there's a man on the other side who would not do us more credit than to suppose that if the case were reversed, there would be any complaint on our side. There's never been any from us in similar circumstances, and there will not be now. Sir, I think we have patriotism enough to overcome the pride and prejudice of the canvass and submit gracefully to the unmistakable verdict of the people. And I have shown that we have nothing else to complain of. I take it that is your complaint. Some of you have said that the election of Mr. Lincoln showed hostility to you and your institution. Sir, it is the common fate of parties to differ, and one does not intend to follow exactly the course of the policy of the other. When you talk of constitutional rights and duties, honest men will observe them alike, no matter what party they belong. It is the constitutional duty of the president to protect public property. The federal courthouse in Portland is public property, and Donald Trump has deployed federal police to protect it. That is his job. Back to Wade again. I say then that so far as I'm concerned, I will yield to no compromise. I do not come here begging either. It would be an indignity to the people I represent if I were to stand here parleying as to the rights of the party which I belong. We have won our right to the chief magistrate of the nation in a way that you have always won your predominance. And if you are willing to do justice to others as to exact it from them, you would never raise an inquiry as to committee for compromises. ... And he goes on from there. And the reference on this is, again, I'll give you the full reference. This is from the Congressional Globe of the 36th Congress, second session, by John on Rivers, Washington, published in 1861, pages 102 and 103. That was speeches was from December 17th, 1860. Now, think about that speech. I talked about how how the speech of the Democrats is so much like the speech of those who are in favor of slavery. Think of what Mr. Senator Wade is saying there, and how much is it like the Republicans of today? We campaigned, you campaigned, we won, yet you have tried to overturn the election over and over and over again. This is what has been happening. This is what has been going on from day one and is still going on today. And yet you have the audacity to suggest that President Trump, having been elected and having the responsibility of protecting federal property, is not doing the right thing by exercising that prerogative and that duty that he has. It's an amazing thing. And it's amazing that our friends on the left do not understand this. And it is amazing that we have reached this point. But that's the point we're at. That is where we are with the left. Because the Democrats are what they apparently always have been. Over the last 20 years, we've seen more and more moves towards segregation. And what's been amazing is we've had Democrats convincing Black students in schools that segregation is good, that you should have separate but equal graduations, that you should have separate but equal clubs. And that Black Americans have fallen for this is an astounding thing to me. But if people knew history, if people were taught history instead of indoctrinated, then maybe they'd recognize it. But people don't know anything but what they've seen on Twitter. They don't know it. And the question really that comes down to all of this, the real question that needs to be answered, is how will the residents of Portland vote? How will the residents of Minneapolis vote? Will they vote for these same people who've done this to them? Or will they not? Or will they leave Portland, go to someplace safe, and then vote in the same way that turned Portland, that turned Minneapolis, that turned Chicago into a pit? Will they do that? Well, that's their decision to make. And let's hope that they make a better decision. Now, I want to switch gears here to Major League Baseball. Now, as everybody who has ever followed my blog knows, I am a huge baseball fan. I started buying baseball cards in 1968. I followed the game, I followed the stats, and I still insist that baseball is the most perfect sport, specifically because there's no time limit, specifically because you have to earn those 27 outs and so forth. I love the game. I'm a Red Sox fan. I've loved what the Red Sox have done. And then they went all Black Lives Matter and all kneeling for the flag. All they had to do was play. There were people waiting to see them play. They decided against it. Now, granted, there are not fans in the stands, although there was at least one fan in the stand. There's a great picture of Tony Fanucci, or Dr. Fauci, I should say. He threw out the first pitch in the national game. I don't blame him. He loves baseball. And I don't blame, frankly, if you're a leftist and you love baseball, you're right to love baseball. It's a wonderful sport. And if you can still take joy in baseball, take joy in it and enjoy it as you should. It's a wonderful thing. I can't take joy in it anymore. And the fact that I can't take joy in it anymore, you cannot imagine how much it grieves me. The fact that I cannot, they just make me mad now to think of them. Anyway. It's a terrible thing. But he threw out the first pitch at the Washington Nationals game wearing a mask. Now, remember, he's on the pitcher's mound. He is 60 feet away. And he throws the ball, and he threw it wide. He's an old man. He threw it wide. He's excited. I mean, cripes, I'd be excited and might throw it wide too if I was doing it. We're not all George Bush who threw a perfect strike when he had the chance. But what's really funny is they show him in the stands watching the game with his mask off, sitting next to people. Now, if you and this is Karol Markowitz saying, here's another example of what I mean from the expert our country looks to. Which of these is more dangerous? Why is he wearing a mask not near anyone, but not wearing it up close? It's completely backward. And again, it's stuff like that is why people don't trust the left. And because of that dichotomy, I'm going to switch very briefly to what was going to be the last topic. And that was about rules and so forth. And I'm going to tell you a story about a Twitter exchange today that I have been threatened with a lawsuit over. Now, one of the interesting things about Twitter is that sometimes you'll see an old tweet retweeted that you made, or someone answering an old tweet. And usually I just ignore it because I've moved on, and Twitter isn't real life, and so big deal. Well, I had tweeted out something concerning Hamilton and noted that Hamilton was a slave trader. Now, in fairness, Hamilton, I called him a slave owner, and somebody pointed out, a fellow by the name of Raphael said, "Hey, I just want to say Hamilton was not a slave owner. He says multiple times over his writing that he fought against it, and Lin-Manuel did even put it in his musical, being clear about it as possible. I mean, he was involved in slavery when he was in the Caribbean, but he was like 100% poor and don't think he really supported slavery like Jefferson did." And I answered him saying the following. And I said, Hamilton was actually involved in the slave trade itself. Saying that would have been more accurate, but as he was buying and selling, you were the owner of property, and he was treating slaves as property. And I said, Jefferson was also against slavery, but he didn't get a pass about cancel culture because a liberal didn't make a play about him. And I continued. You'd saying that, the hands, and by the hands, I mean the people who worked on a ship, on a transatlantic slaver, who chained them on their sides so you could fit more in. And then when they died in the Middle Passage, dumped their bodies overseas. A lot of them were poor too. So would you give the hands on a slave ship a pass if a guy who was a hand on a slave ship ended up getting a statue somewhere? Would you give him a pass on being canceled because he was on a slave ship and, he was poor? Because if he was poor, we give him a pass. Well, after I tweeted that, somebody I never heard of by the name of Trisha tweeted me. Someone, I think that the handle is Enigma Mob 2010. Says, you don't got to bully the guy. Just because history is flawed, you can't change history. You can only change the present and future. But you're the woke one, right? The ridiculous person who's never right. You never did anything wrong. You don't drive on a road, do you? And I pointed out that I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in history as it is. I don't even believe in the canned fans noise that they're pumping into the parks and the broadcast. I believe in things as they are. And this is the reply I made. I'm not a fan of culture, nor do I agree with this tearing down of statues or erasing history. But if our woke lefty friends like the Hamilton writer is going to impose these rules on American culture, he's going to be called on it when he violates them by me. I'll be very happy to go back to the old rules. But until we do, I'm going to apply every damn one of them the left is imposing on them and calling out every single phony who demands an exception from said rules because they vote for Democrat or hate podious real Donald Trump. Well, then I made the mention of real Donald Trump. And leftist, Trisha being a good leftist, once I mentioned real Donald Trump, she went nuts. And she's over there. You don't go to old buildings, eat vegetables, wear cotton, clothes made of cotton, or anything else associated with the current child labor and immigrant labor situation. That's what I thought. You hypocrite. Go fuck yourself. And again, this is Trisha words, not mine. Trump is a racist, you dick. He called Hispanics murderers. Guess who? I'll more people write people. Trump has killed hundreds of thousands of people by not doing anything to COVID-19. He has out the military for our own people. You're also a racist prick as well. Now remember, I didn't tweet this woman. This woman tweeted me, and this is how I answered her. I'm simply applying the rules I oppose, by the way, that he himself and the woke like him have tried to apply to others on him. Your anger speaks volumes. Spoken like a true Groucho Marxist who proudly proclaimed, I have principles, and if you don't like them, I have others. Well, again, here's Trisha still angry. You're sitting here on Twitter and you're participating in cyberbullying and being the biggest hypocrite. Go back to your mom, your base auntie. I don't know what that is, because you're obviously just as evil as Trump. Look at the mirror in the mirror before condemning a man who's done more for the world than you ever will. Now, this is why I'm laughing at this. Thomas Jefferson. How much for the world has Thomas Jefferson done? George Washington built the country. Even Robert E. Lee, after the Confederacy surrendered, went to Southerners and said, apply for pardon, go back to the Union. And one Confederate officer, there's actually a story from Shelby Foote's book saying his father took him. You have disgraced the family, sir, by asking for a pardon that was offered by the federal government. And he said, but sir, General Lee advised me to do it. And the guy was suddenly taken aback. That alters the case. Whatever General Lee says is all right. Or Longstreet, who became a Republican and served in the Grant administration, or Grant, who they've canceled. All of those goods he has done. Doesn't matter, cancel them. But Lynn has done for the world besides his music. He's associated with many charities. He single-handedly did more for Trump than FEMA and FEMA did for their own citizens. You condemn a man for making a play about a history played by an all people of color cast, which is another thing. I thought now under the woke rules, you can't, cast people outside of their race. Remember, Scarlett Johansson is now out of this project where she was going to play a trans woman. So I thought that was very funny. Well, I thought it was so funny that I said, I promised her, I'm going to make a point to mention you in my live stream podcast today at 3 p.m., which I hope to outdraw Joe Biden's live stream. And so far, it looks like I haven't, and I'm very disappointed at that. But I'll look at the final numbers. Maybe we have over the course of the day. So we'll check on that. So I put that, I'm going to mention her. And this is what her answer. I love the answer. Nope, you're being blocked for being a cyberbully. Now, at this point, I've already said I'd like to say more, but I needed to get tires. I had a flat yesterday, so I had to get a couple of tires for my car, so I left. So after I'm gone, you're blocked for being a cyberbully when you sit at home in your mom's basement with no life. She says to the 32-year married man. But I'm blocked. I remember I never tweeted this woman. She tweeted me. And then she's over, and if you mention me without my permission, you will hear from my lawyers. You do not have my permission. Bye. And she's blocked me. Now, I don't know this woman's name. I only know her Twitter account. Her name is Trisha. Her account is Enigma Mom 2010. She decided to tweet at me. And I answered, which I don't know if she can see. She might be able to see if she went to do it. Or maybe she's watching and is recording for the lawsuit. Hi, Trisha, enjoy your lawsuit. Am I to understand that you are threatening to sue me for repeating what you are saying to me in a public forum that the entire world can see on a podcast? I submit and suggest that the grounds for such a suit would be interesting. So sue away. I'll enjoy the countersuit. So, Trisha, if you want to sue me, unlike you, I have my actual name up there. You have my actual face. And I've read your words verbatim from Twitter. Because the notification still shows the listings you said in my using TweetDeck. So I could still see them even though you've blocked me. So if you want to sue me, as the Southerners would say, bless your heart, you go ahead and do it. I'll countersue. It'll be expensive for both of us. I mean, I'm not a rich man. If I was a rich man, I would not be doing a No Frills podcast, and I'd probably have more people watching. But that's okay. You go ahead and sue me if you want. And the funny thing is, I haven't blocked her, though she blocked me. And the reason why I haven't blocked her is why I never block leftists. I mean, you put porn in my stream, I block you. Or if you're a robot, I'll block you. Or if there's something phony, I'll block it. Like I had mentioned, Sissy Willis is probably watching right now. Hi, Sissy. One of the great bloggers. In fact, if she ever wants to write again, I know Juliet can't write because of AB5, but if you want to take her place for the end of the year, be happy to pay you to write on the site. I had made a challenge because I tweeted about something. That a leftist reporter who I like had tweeted a point, and I agreed with that point because the point he made was valid. And I'm having a sudden brain fart as to who I'm talking about, because I must be getting old, because this is happening more and more, which worries me. But luckily, I'm not Joe Biden running for president. Well, what ends up happening is I noticed that the accounts that retweeted me right away, and I was told them that I would be explaining what was interesting about the retweets, where there were accounts that had almost no followers, were following almost no people, and we're fairly, sitting around. And basically what the left has done is they've put, you can recognize, but it's like Joe Morgan. I was talking baseball earlier. Joe Morgan, the great second baseman for the Astros and then the Reds. Well, Dave Weigel. Dave Weigel was the original person tweeting. And Joe Morgan used to say people would pitch out against him, but he would always just be standing on the base because he always knew when a pitch out was coming, because there were one or two signs. And once you knew those signs, you knew them all. When you're talking about a phony account that's only there to monitor conservatives and then tweet out a bunch of things against you to try and, take up your time, you look for, okay, very few followers, all these people following each other and all coordinated. And that's what those early tweets were. So you can spot them every single time. But this is what the left is. And I leave them up there because if you're in my timeline, I want people to be able to see them. I want the people to be able to see the left as they say it. And if people think my arguments are bad, God bless them. They can decide that I'm wrong. If you think that Trish's rant made more sense than mine, by all means, agree with her. But I ain't going to block her. I want people to see what they say. And this is what I've argued about the left over and over again, that the difference between the left and the right is that the left wants the right not to be seen. Because if people see the right in their own words, they tend to win. Now, in fairness, not all people. I mean, there are a percentage of people who sincerely think that the left is right on these things and who sincerely have these beliefs. I think these beliefs are nonsense, but there are people, if you show 10 people something, you're going to have, or 100 people would be a better example. You're going to have one group that thinks one way, one group that thinks another way, and a couple of people who I call the crazy uncles, who are just lunatics. And you can find the lunatics on both the left and right. There's a great video, if you haven't seen it, Racist versus Woke, and it's saying how they get along, and they're all saying this exact same thing, it's very funny, very great comedy. But I maintain and submit and suggest, and I think the left understands, that if the right is shown unfiltered and unspun by the left, the majority will support the right. Which is why they do all they can. That's why when they thought Donald Trump was going to lose, they would show him unfiltered in the primaries, because they thought Donald Trump would lose the general election, so we're going to show him unfiltered. One of the greatest ideas, one of the greatest stupidity ideas for the left, because people were able to see Trump in his own words. It was an amazing thing. And by the way, VDare has just suggested that Trump invite Nicholas Sandsman, who just won that case, to the White House. Great idea. I agree with Ann Coulter there. That would be a smart move. But I digress a little bit. But the left doesn't want the right to be seen. So Trump's speeches and Trump rallies are now truncated. Now, the left was showing the protests for a while, but this week, and I say protests with a grain of salt, this week, Antifa and the Black Lives Matter people tried to put up barricades to keep federal agents inside the federal building and then torch it. And all of a sudden, that coverage disappeared. And it disappeared. So, in other words, as soon as the left was being shown as they were, the coverage disappeared. And remember, how many times have we seen leftists beat up people or try and take their phones for filming what they're doing? Over and over and over again, this happens. Over and over and over again, this happens. So, Trisha, I've quoted your tweets verbatim. You want to sue me for that, you go ahead. And again, if people agree with Trisha, that's fine. If you think her points are fine, and I will give her this. On the basic principle, she's right. This guy has produced a play. It may be good. I admit I haven't watched Hamilton. I was never big into Alexander Hamilton anyways. I mean, I didn't like his views on the Bank of the United States to some degree. I didn't like his wanting to go to war with France. But he's one of the founders of the country. And he did much more good than bad. All of those points of Trisha's are valid. But my point isn't that. My point is that Lin-Manuel and the other woke people are imposing a different standard on Jefferson, on Lincoln, on Grant, on Lee, on Gandhi, on St. Junipero Serra, but have not applied that standard to Hamilton and his own play because he's a leftist. It's an indulgence, and I won't allow him that indulgence. As Kurt Schlichter said, you won't like the new rules. And apparently, Trisha doesn't like the new rules applied on them. Now, she's right in principle. Her principle is right, and I would agree with that principle. And as soon as the Trishas of the world and the Lin-Manuels of the world are willing to go back to the old rules and to stop trying to pull down statues and to stop trying to cancel people who disagree with them or whoever did something they disapprove of, I'm all in with them. But until then, these are your rules. These aren't mine. And I'm going to make you live up to them. And if you don't like that, well, that's too bad. And the funny thing is about cancel culture is you never go far enough. And it was very funny because Ted Wheeler had gone into the crowd to join the quote-unquote protest. And he found himself mobbed and people going after him and people calling on him to resign because he wasn't woke enough. And this brings us back to Major League Baseball, football, basketball, and hockey. Now, I think the major sports have made a mistake. And it's a mistake that the left has made. And I've used this Glenn Reynolds quote before. Glenn Reynolds was on the BBC or on some British radio the day after the election. He talked about media bias, and he said 90% of reporters are giving the other 10% a bad name. And I caught this, and I understood he was serious, but the BBC thought he had just reversed the numbers accidentally and didn't pursue it. And I think Glenn was hoping they would pursue it so that he could nail them on it. But that's just my opinion. Well, the 90% of the left on Twitter is giving the other 10% a bad name. Twitter is a reverse iceberg. The support for the left on Twitter is very loud, but it's very hollow. And the sports leagues have decided that support is important. But the reality is, what's important are the fans who sit in the seats. Now, I mentioned already, Major League Baseball has gone all in. The Red Sox could put up a big Black Lives Matter thing at their park and so forth. I ain't watching. In fact, Dynasty Baseball is lucky that I had auto-renewed 3 days before this happened, or I probably wouldn't have renewed because I'm upset by it. I'm not going to promote baseball anymore. Once a week, I would do a post on the updates on my current leagues. And I'm not going to do them anymore. I got one more update I want to do because I did not promote the National League West, and the people in the National League West, hi Val, that's my wife coming in, deserve to get their credit, but I'm not going to do those anymore. And I put out a notice to the members of my league and one extremely woke member out of the 23 wrote back saying how horrible a person I am and how evil a person I am. And I've never been anything but polite to this person. And he, blocked me and did that same thing. He Trisha'd me. Maybe we'd make Trisha into a verb. Nah, I mean, this too many leftists do it. It would be unfair to Trisha there. But anyways, I digress. So fine. He doesn't want to play. Let him not play with me. That's not real life. I can live without it. And the really funny thing is, people have like me who love baseball have lived without it in April, lived without it in May, lived without it in June, and have lived without it for most of July. And when your customer base has demonstrated that it could do without you, it's probably a bad idea to antagonize a good chunk of it, because they've already got used to doing without you. So now if they boycott you, if they don't decide to watch, if they don't decide to buy the Major League Baseball package or call up and demand a refund, it's not a big deal. They've done without it for months. And I laugh again. They're putting in fake fan noise, which I hate because it's phony. I wonder if they're going to put in fake boos for when they start kneeling for the flag, because a lot of fans would boo if they were there. Remember when the Patriots players were kneeling and they're, get up, get up? You could hear this stuff. The NFL is planning to play with 20% capacity. That's going to be good news for them, because people won't notice that a lot of fans staying away. And they'll be able to say, oh, well, it's less fans because there's only 20% capacity. Well, Major League Baseball has no fans right now. Basketball has no fans right now. Hockey, no. Actually, I don't know if hockey is allowed to have fans or not. I know that they're doing Black Lives Matter stuff, but not as loudly. But, next year, they're going to hope for fans in those seats. And what these sports leagues don't realize are the two prongs. Prong number one is they will discover they will never be woke enough for the left. They will demand more and more and more. And the moment you disagree with them, remember, Ted Wheeler would not defund the police. He's a racist. All you have to do is disagree with them on any one point, and you are instantly a racist to these people. And they have no shame about playing these cards. This is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen to you guys. And all you players who are doing this, you will be made to care by them. Now, they only have power if you let that power be over you. But as to you guys like Gabe Kapler, who was on the 2004 Sox, and I liked as a player, you spoiled baseball for me. You took away my love for the sport by what you did. I'll never forgive you. I mean, I'm a Christian. I'm required to forgive you. I'll even pray for you on a daily basis. I'm going to have to pray for Trisha too now, because I'll tell you, sometimes Christianity stinks. It really stinks, because I don't pray. Oh, pray to change people. That's not how Christianity works. You just pray for the best for them. I don't pray for. I mean, if I know someone's sick, I'll mention, they're sick, give them a hand. But I don't pray for make them more like me type of thing, because that's then it becomes about me. When you pray for your enemies or pray for people who hate you, you should just pray. You just pray to God and say, God, take care of them as best they can, as they need. All you can do. That's Christian, and it's hard. I cannot. It is, especially when you mean it. It is really hard. But that's the job description of Christianity. You have to do it. But I'm digressing again. But next year, they hope to have fans in the seats. What are they going to do once the fans start booing? Or stop showing up? Or decide, you know what? I don't need these season tickets. You couldn't give me Red Sox season tickets. If last week someone said, Peter, you've been a loyal fan since 1968. You've gone to games. You've taken your kids to games. You've traveled the country on vacations and gone to games with your wife, who is about to write me a note, which reminds me, someone called for you. There's a message on the phone. You're going to want to listen to that. My wife was off hitting quilt shops today. She loves quilting. I love that she loves quilting. She makes beautiful quilts, by the way. My wife makes absolutely beautiful quilts, and you should see them. They're beautiful. She's incredible with quilts. But I'm digressing again. But they're going to need those fans in the seats. And if they decide they don't care, what are you going to do? What happens when I'm no longer buying Red Sox hats or buying them for my kids or hopefully someday my grandkids? Even if you lose 10%, that's huge for a sport that doesn't have the same appeal to the young because it's a slow sport. And if you want to speed up the sport, they should raise the mound and get more outs faster. That's how you speed up the game. But see, I don't know. The wife has not walked into the frame of the picture, so you cannot see her. Tough luck. So this is what's going on here. Baseball is short-sighted, and I can understand how baseball, football, basketball, and hockey can be so short-sighted. The media is overwhelmingly leftist. The people on Twitter and social media are overwhelmingly leftist. They're falling for it. And you got to remember something. Most of the sports teams, this isn't a thing for profit. Most of owning a sports team is mostly vanity. It's vanity. And they figure it goes up in value and someone else wants to own a sports team. Once these things happen, it's going to be trouble. And what happens if after the election, when Trump is reelected, and Trump is going to be reelected, and I'm about to explain why, the president decides, you know what? Baseball, you don't need that antitrust exemption. What if Audrey Huff and Kurt Schilling decide to make their own little minor league where you have to stand for the flag, and if you don't, you're not paid? I'd go to those games. I mean, I was going to go to the Red Sox AAA team was moving to Worcester, 20 minutes away. I couldn't wait to go to those games. Now you couldn't pay me to go. Not interested. You hate me? You want to support Marxists who want to kill cops? No way. That's what you want to support. God bless you. You support that. And may life treat you well. You have the baseball, football, basketball, and hockey have the right to decide what they want their customer base to be. Just like Doctor Who had the right to decide what they wanted their customer base to be. And if they want their customer base to be not me, so be it. But don't complain when your ratings are in the toilet. Don't complain when you get woke and go broke. And that brings me to the polls. Now, they might be seeing the polls and saying, well, Joe Biden's way up. Yeah, the polls were wrong about Hillary, but everybody knows Trump now. Yeah, Trump has a record. It's a damn good record. But more importantly than this, I'm amazed that people that trust the polls. Now, let me give you an example. We talked about Trisha earlier. Now, here's a woman who got angry at me, swearing at me, and so forth, blocked me, and threatened to sue me for publicly supporting. I mean, I just mentioned Donald Trump once. And this woman was doing all this and now threatening me with a lawsuit. There have been people beaten, spat on, violence committed against them for publicly supporting Trump. We have the media calling people Nazis. We have Jenny Hill of ESPN saying, if you voted for Donald Trump, you're a racist, period. And I haven't seen ESPN and Disney, who own those companies, denounce that, probably because they want that Chinese money, just like the NBA wants that Chinese money. And a lot of this is about Chinese money, but you got to be careful about that Chinese money because it might not always be there. And there are little signs that there might not be, which we're not going to talk about this week because I want to see how these play out. But the thing is, think about this. So we've seen violence against Trump supporters. We've seen attempts to cancel Trump supporters. We've seen lawsuits. You've seen all these things happen to people who supported Donald. Well, look at Nick Sanderman, what CNN and all these other people who are now settling lawsuits against him tried to do with him. You saw Tucker Carlson talk about the New York Times trying to dox him again. And yet, when a media or a college that is going after conservatives and proudly going after conservatives, look what they're trying to do to the head of legal insurrection. Longtime college professor at Cornell. Suddenly, they're trying to get rid of him. They're trying to silence him. They're attacking him. Look at what they said about Mike Adams, who died. And now Professor Jacobson is going through this. And by the way, Mr. Adams, rest in peace. The left not even waiting a day after he dies to go after Mike Adams. I stopped myself from saying what I didn't want to say. But look at this. So these people now call up. So a pollster from a media or a college calls up and says, hey, we'd like to ask you some questions. Are you planning on voting for Donald Trump? How many such people Now me, I tell them because I don't care. I'm not going to run and hide. I already told you the story about the people with guns in front of my house and me going out with the camera. I'm not going to live in fear of these people. I can't live that way. I won't live that way. That's why I've always been a very public Catholic and a very public conservative. I'm there out front so that I don't have to hide, which is probably why I'm not in much of a job. I mean, I'm in Massachusetts, and even the Republicans in Massachusetts don't like Donald Trump. It's probably why you're seeing a podcast of this quality at this stanch and that hasn't caught Joe Biden, I'm sorry to say. But the point being, I'll tell the truth on that. But a lot of people aren't gonna. Why would you believe such polls? Why would you expect such people to speak the truth knowing what the left does? They'll do their talking in the polls. They'll do their talking on election day. And remember, like the dictators like Ceausescu in Romania, he had 99% popularity right up until the day they put him against the wall and shot him. This is what totalitarians do. And when people get a chance to strike back, they do. That's why the polls can't be trusted. That anyone believes this is ridiculous. That the sports leagues believe it is ridiculous. And there was this great thing. I think it was PragerU, but I might be wrong. They had this video of 4 young black men being interviewed about how many unarmed black men get shot a year. And they were guessing in the thousands. The number is under 20 by police, incidentally, we were talking about. And white men, they were saying about 10 or 15, and they were right. It's disinformation, and there are people who've bought into this disinformation. Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, and others have bought into it. Now, if these people believe in it strongly and actually believe it, they have the right. It's their league. They have the right to believe and push what they want. But don't complain when you suddenly see that the local car dealership doesn't want you endorsing them. Don't complain when suddenly the ticket sales are down and the TV revenues are down, and suddenly you can't get those big contracts anymore. Don't complain when your league ends up contracting because there are not enough people who want to watch it. Don't complain. You did it to yourself. And what's really funny is that anyone who's gone to a big sporting event knows that there's usually a lot of police around. In fact, one of my biggest memories of the great David Ortiz game-tying grand slam against the Tigers was the policeman putting his hands up in victory as the ball goes over the fence while the center fielder for the Tigers made the incredible attempt to catch that ball. I mean, that was if he had one more step, it would have been the greatest catch in sports history. It just would have been. It was a great effort. We went right over the fence. You should watch the video, whether or not you're into baseball or not. It was just incredible. But there was a policeman in the bullpen to protect the players. There are policemen around the park to protect the players. There are policemen in the area to protect the people there. What happens if those policemen, when you start endorsing a movement that says kill police, a movement that says defund police, a movement that tries to burn federal agents inside buildings? What do you think those police? Do you think those police will be all that interested in saving your bacon? Now, police will do their duty. If something happens right in front of them, I'm sure they'll react. But are they going to go out of their way to protect you? Good luck with that. See, I think that's really stupid. Now, granted, these are ball players, and some ball players are very bright. Some ball players, all they knew how to do is play ball. I think it's a bad move. I think it's a foolish move. But, that's their call. Now, a little bit of extra news as we're getting up. Lee Stranahan has invited me to be on his radio show. I don't have all the details yet, but I believe it's going to be Monday. I think his producer's supposed to call me Monday at 9:15 Eastern time. So I'm going to have to make sure I'm awake. I know it because I get home from work at midnight and I sit down and, believe it or not, I watch Stargirl with my wife because it's something I do with my wife. I think it's very funny. But I'm supposed to be on his show. So if you follow Lee on Twitter, check out his show. It's on 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern time, apparently. So you can check me out, and we're going to talk about some of the things we talked about today. So I'll be on radio. I'm going to have to remember to wake up early because that's the first day of my work week. I work Sunday to Thursday. But that's where you can find me. And, of course, you can find us at DaTechGuyBlog.com, DaTechGuyBlog.com. If you like what you've seen on this podcast, give it a thumbs up. I thank the people who thumbs upped us today. If you don't, and then Juliet, I know you see you trolled her a little. Don't troll her. Don't troll these people. People like that aren't worth trolling. But I don't care. I let what they say. My thing is let what they say stand in the thing of ideas, and like my own ideas. Let what I say. You've heard me give my opinions today. You've heard me give my analysis. You've seen my writing. I've been writing now for 12 years on this site. If you agree with me, you go ahead, agree with me. You disagree with me, you go ahead and disagree with me. I will let my opinions stand for themselves. You can like them or dislike them. You can agree or disagree. If you like what I've said here, go ahead and like it online. If you really like it, hit the tip jar. That helps pay for stuff. The only reason why I'm doing this podcast is I wanted more hits and about 180 more a month in the tip jar. So if you like what you see, hit the tip jar. Tell your friends about it. Spread the word. Well, that's about all the time we have. My wife is home. I would like to visit with her a little bit since it's our shared day off. I want to thank you for being here for the podcast. Share the live stream with your friends. They can watch it, as an ended podcast. See what you agree, disagree, leave comments. Like I say, I don't mind comments against me. If my opinions are worth something, they'll stand up under fire. But the rest of you have a great weekend. And think, and most importantly, I'm going to quote St. John Paul II here. Be not afraid. Be not afraid. You take care. Thanks for watching.